During these crazy times, if you're running a team or maybe even an entire office, you're probably trying to transition from this, presenting to your whole team in person, which you're comfortable with, to this, presenting through a webcam using an online meeting tool. And that can be pretty intimidating if you haven't done much of it before. Now, the difference between a very successful online meeting and one that goes really poorly is how well you understand the tool that you're using. What I'm going to demonstrate for you today is Zoom. Zoom is my absolute favorite tool for online meetings. It's very user-friendly, and they've really thought through the features to make sure you have exactly what you need to run a very effective online meeting. Now, the first thing you're going to need is to have an account, obviously. Zoom offers a free account, or you can do a paid version. On the free account, you're limited to 40 minutes for your meetings, but you can have up to 100 attendees. So it's a decent deal. But if you want to go ahead and go for the paid account, you're going to remove that limitation on that meeting length. Okay, so let's take a look at Zoom itself here. So what you see here on the screen is what you're going to see when you first click on Meetings on the left-hand side after you've logged into your account. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through how to set up a new meeting. Well, obviously, right here, you're going to see your existing meetings, but to create a new one, click on Schedule a New Meeting. And I'm going to walk you through each of the steps here. First thing you want to do is give it a name. Now, the name and description are going to be public facing for anybody that has the information about the meeting. So make sure you're specific about what the topic is, right? So you might say, brokerage team meeting, just as an example. In your description, you may want to elaborate, tell people what the meeting is about. Now, further down from here, you're going to schedule the meeting. Now, just because you're scheduling it at this time does not mean it automatically starts at this time. You choose when to manually start it. You're not limited to this time, but this is what the people who are attending are going to see. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as scheduled for 3/17 at 3 o'clock, which is just a little bit of time from right now as I'm recording this. The next is your duration. How long is the meeting going to be? Now, again, you're not limited to this time. It's not like it's going to automatically shut off after 1 hour, but this is what you're telling the people who are attending in the invitation you're sending them. Make sure your time zone is accurate. You want to make sure you've selected the time zone you're actually currently in, and we are in Central Time here. And then you may want to also create a recurring meeting. So if you want the meeting to be something that happens on a regular kind of repeated schedule, you're going to select recurring meeting and then fill out when you want it to recur. So in this case, it would be set to daily, but you have a lot of other options as well. And you can even do something that's completely customized, obviously. So we're going to unselect recurring because in this case, we don't want this to be a recurring meeting. The next option you have is registration. Now the question here is it important for you to know ahead of time who plans to attend the meeting? If so, you're going to want to go ahead and click required. That requires people to register ahead of time. I would typically not select that because otherwise all you have to do is just email them or give them a link and then they can click on it and join the meeting instantaneously. No registration required. The next is meeting ID. Now, I would usually leave this at generate automatically, but you can select to use your personal meeting ID. It's really not a necessary step in most cases. Next thing is a meeting password. I'm going to go ahead and unselect that again. You only really want to put limitations on accessing the meeting if there's an important reason to do so. A lot of people are still not the best with technology, so every additional step you give them is just one more headache that they're going to deal with when signing into the account, right? So usually leave that meeting password unselected. The only case I would recommend it is if you're talking about personal or private information that you want to make sure only the right people are able to join. Now the next option here is called video. This is where you're going to select if the video for the host and participants is on or off when the meeting starts. I would go ahead and select on, and the reason I would do that is that, again, a lot of people have trouble with technology, so any step you can remove for them to get onto the meeting and not have to figure anything out, you're going to want to go ahead and do that ahead of time. So again, this is how you set yourself up for success in advance. That way you don't have a whole bunch of people getting on asking how to turn their camera on. It's not all that hard, but it's going to happen, right? The next is audio. I would leave it defaulted to both, but you do have the option of limiting them to just computer audio or having to call in through a telephone to access the audio. Again, I would leave it selected to both. And then this is where it gets interesting, really kind of interesting, powerful meeting options. Okay, there's 5 total. I'm going to go through them one at a time. The first is enabling people to join before the host. What that means is that they would be able to join the meeting before you've gotten on it and actually technically started it. If you allow that, the only downside is that people are going to be logged in whenever they choose to, and they're all kind of just hanging out, talking to each other. Obviously, with your own internal team, that's probably not a problem, but if you're talking about a bunch of people you don't know personally, you may not want to allow them to join ahead of time. We're going to let them join ahead of time for now because, again, this is an internal meeting. The next one I would highly recommend you select, which is to mute participants upon entry. That means everyone's going to default to being muted when they first join the call or the conversation. They can unmute themselves, right? So this doesn't mean that they can't talk during the meeting, but that way you don't have a whole bunch of people jumping on and there's all this commotion and noise, a problem that was pretty common with conference calls back in the day. The next option is to enable the waiting room, which we're going to go ahead and select. The waiting room means that when people sign in, right, when they join the meeting, they're actually placed in a separate room first, so they're not allowed to directly interact with each other, right? So they're not all sitting in that meeting, talking to each other ahead of time. I don't necessarily think you need to use that, but I'm going to enable it just so you can see how it works. The next one is, do you want only authenticated users? To be authenticated, they are going to be required to have a Zoom account. I would not recommend that because not all of your people probably have a Zoom account currently, so leave that unchecked. And then finally, do you want to record the meeting or not? I would highly recommend you record it. And one cool thing about using something like Zoom when you do your team meetings is now you have a copy of it if you record it, which means anybody who didn't attend still can see it, right? You can even maybe require that they watch the recording if they weren't there in person. So you're actually able to ensure that more people are receiving the information versus when you do in-person meetings. So as you get more accustomed to this, you may actually find there's aspects of it that you personally prefer. On the right-hand side here, you're going to have a choice between in the cloud or on the local computer. If you select the local computer, it's going to record that video to the hard drive on the computer you're using to run the meeting. If you select in the cloud, it will not take up any space on your computer, but you will have to download the video at a later time. And then finally, we have alternative hosts. And what you can do here is send an email to anybody who you'd like to have the same hosting access that you have. So if you want somebody else to be able to, for instance, start the meeting, if you're running late, for instance, you're going to want to make sure you put their email in here and they're going to receive that invitation. Obviously, if you have an admin or something someone that's helping you, you're going to want to go ahead and put their email in there. And then when you're done, you go ahead and click on Save. All right, so now the meeting is ready to go. Let's go ahead and click on it so that we can invite people to it. There's a couple ways you can invite them. It's easy enough just to send them this URL. So if you copy that URL, you can send it however you want, email, direct message, text. If they click on it, it will take them directly to that meeting we set up. The other option is to come over here and click on copy the invitation. This is the more formal looking invitation with more instructions. You click on copy meeting invitation, and that's going to give you a copy which you can put into an email or do whatever you want with. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting so you can see how that works. So you go up here and click on Start This Meeting. Okay, so now at this point, the actual meeting is starting, okay? So there's a few things that are going to happen automatically. Now, first of all, you're going to see that my camera turned on, right? So my camera is actually built into my laptop below the screen. It's a little bit strange. It's not a common situation, but you can see me on the screen because it automatically defaults to turning my camera on. In addition, I need to click on Join with Computer Audio to turn the audio on. Now, anybody who would be in this meeting is interacting with me already. So they're seeing me, they're hearing me, I'm good to go on my end, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just to show you how this works here, I'm going to show you a couple other steps. Okay, well, here we go. So Vanessa, you can see, is in my waiting room now, right? So she is not able to interact with us yet, but once I click on admit, she should now be able to join. Hey, Vanessa, good to see you. So now you can see that there's two of us on the screen, and as you can see, Vanessa defaulted to having her camera turned on as well, but she's also, as you can see with this little icon here, currently muted, and that's a good thing. We want her to stay muted, right? Now I'm going to add one more person, which is just me on my cell phone, so give me just a second here. And the reason I'm doing this is I want you to see what the layout looks like on the screen with different kinds of setups working. So let me go ahead and start this really quickly, and we should see an additional person added to the meeting here in just a second. All right, there we go. So this one, which is also Nick Niehaus, you can see I don't have my video turned on currently. And one thing you'll notice is when people log in on their phone, sometimes there's different settings. So that's why it did not turn on. I actually am going to go ahead and turn it on so you can see it, but I'm not going to turn the audio on that device. So now you can see I'm on my phone over here as well. So it might get kind of disorienting, right? So I'm going to go ahead and set this over here. It's kind of a little demo. We'll pretend like that's a third person for the sake of the training here. Okay, so now you're running the meeting, everything's up and running. I want to show you a few of the other things you can do while you're managing the meeting. So down here along the bottom, let's go through each of these one at a time. First thing is your mute or unmute, right? So if I click on mute, that means no one can hear me on the meeting anymore. I'm going to go ahead and unmute it so that my participants can actually hear me. You can start and stop your video. And then next to each of these, you can also select where is the audio coming from. So in this case, I can select which microphone am I using, and I'm using the microphone built into my computer. You can select what speakers are playing the audio, all kinds of stuff. And if you're having any trouble with your audio connection, you go in here and you can actually click on test speaker and microphone. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to play some little tunes, right? So that means the speakers are working. That's good. So yes, I heard the tone, and I'm going to speak a little bit. I heard the tone, and it plays it back. All right, so I also heard that. So everything's good to go. That will help you figure out if you're having issues with either of those, right? Same thing goes for video. You can click here. You can select which webcam you're using, and you can also come in and select video settings. A lot of settings. I'm not going to show you every single one of them here, but a couple things you can mess with is you can actually adjust, whether or not you have HD. Do you want to have the mirror effect going on? So if I click on that, it'll flip me the other way around. So it depends on which way you want yourself to be kind of oriented. And then another one's kind of cool is you can actually touch up your appearance. So if you click on that check mark box, should actually make your skin look a little smoother, make you look a little bit better on camera. I'm not going to select that at the moment. And then a few other settings in here. Again, I'm not going to go through all those because those are less frequently used. All right, so what else do we have? We have invite, which means we can select this and we can actually send out emails while the meeting's happening to additional people. We can copy the URL. So maybe we need to copy that and throw it into a direct message or post it in a Facebook group, something like that. Or you can copy the entire invitation there. And then the next thing you have is manage your participants. If you click that, it's going to open up your participants list here. And what I want to show you as we're looking at this list is what to do if something like this occurs, right? So you've probably been doing this before. You're on the call and all of a sudden somebody gets a phone call, right? And they disrupt what you're doing. Uh-oh, Vanessa's got her phone out, right? So if she starts talking, that's not good, right? She's going to interrupt the meeting. So what you want to do is come down here and click mute all. So just go ahead and click mute all, right? And immediately it shuts everybody up, all right? So that is it's probably the number one thing that really messes up this kind of meeting format is people doing something and not realizing that they're unmuted and that they're making a whole bunch of noise. And you've probably been through a conference call before, right? Whoever's unmuted, please stop talking. Okay, whoever's doing that, right? And it just destroys the call, completely distracts everybody, and it's a huge waste of time. So one of the things Zoom did is they actually built in these abilities to mute everyone and unmute everyone at the same time. In addition to that, you can come over here and you can mute and you can actually rename people. Don't know why you would need to use that really at any point, but you can change their name. And then obviously you can also ask them to turn their camera off or on there as well. Okay, so that's how you look at the participants. We're gonna go ahead and click on that, closes that box. Next thing, I'm gonna skip over share for a second. I'm gonna go ahead and click on chat. It's just example, kind of throw something in here, but the chat is obviously, you can send messages to everyone. So if you type something in here, and this is what you wanna keep an eye on, just in case anybody has a question, especially if they're muted, right? So if you've muted everyone, you wanna make sure you keep the chat open every now and then so you can see if anybody's saying anything, right? All right, so there you go, right? So Vanessa's asking if she can ask a quick question, right? So in that case, I might want to go back and unmute her and let her ask her question. And actually, if you're smart about this, you would tell your team ahead of time that that's how you want them to interact, right? So basically, make them either say something in the chat, or another thing that they can do is they can actually raise their hand. So that's what's kind of cool. Let me see if I can show you an example of that really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and raise my hand on that one. So you can see what happens here, right? The little hand icon showed up on the screen. And that means that this person probably has a question or wants to make a comment. So I can go ahead and click on that to get rid of the notification. And then I can come on to theirs and say, okay, I want to go ahead and, for instance, unmute this person or turn their video off and on, that kind of stuff, right? So that way I can make sure that I'm answering people. So there's two options, in my opinion, either send a chat message or have them raise their hand. Please ask people not to just randomly unmute themselves because that can get very distracting. Last thing I'll mention in the chat here is that you can click where it says everyone and you can actually change it to send a direct message to someone, right? So now if I do this, let's go ahead and hit sest. it's only sending that message to the other version of me over here. And now on that screen, I just received that private message, right? So that's the chat function, can be very useful. And then I'm going to show you a few things in more, and then I'll go back to share at the end. So a couple things that are really cool about Zoom is you can come in here and click on more, and you can actually stream this meeting to an existing group on Facebook or a page or wherever you want, right? So if you want to have everybody interacting here, but you also want to share it into like a private Facebook group, something like that, you can do that through here. You can also control whether or not you stop and start the recording, which started automatically because we had that started, and you can see it up here in the corner as well that it's currently recording. I can pause it and I can stop it up there as well. Finally, I'll mention you can also stream to YouTube if you have any use for that. Okay, so let's go back to share, because share is it's got a lot of options in it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the share button, and this is where you're going to determine this is where you're going to share your presentation. Okay, so let's show an example of that. So if you're doing this, you've got your meeting up and running, and you can actually do this a little bit early. So if you want to have this all set up before people start to log in, just start your meeting about 10 minutes early, come here, click on, you want to see this icon. This means that this is your Chrome screen, right? So I actually have two different windows of Chrome open. I have this other piece of software, and then I have the Zoom itself, right? And we want to be sharing the actual Chrome screen, right? Now, if I click on this one, which just says screen, that shows everything on my screen, right? I don't necessarily want to show everything on my screen, especially because it's going to show my Zoom setup and all my controls. So what I want is I want to show just this. So actually, I'm going to exit out of this for just a second so you can see a better example. If I had come over here and selected this already, pull up my Zoom controls again, and I come to share, now you can see my presentation is showing there, okay? So I click on that, and I click share, and obviously the screen changes. And then what I want to do is I want to come in here and click present. So now I'm presenting my presentation, and the people who are consuming this meeting, they're able to see both. So they're able to see my screen with the presentation showing, and they can also see the video that I'm streaming through the camera down here, right? Now all I have to do is present as normal, okay? They have a little bit of control on how they view this, so they can scroll back and forth and they can actually see just the presentation, or they can see all the people who are participating in the meeting, so that's up to them. You don't have to worry about that on your end, right? A couple other things you can do I want to mention real quick is as you're doing this, as you're presenting, you can click over here, which is going to give you just, I believe, the person who is talking or one of your guests, and then you can actually click on this to make this very small. And then if we come up here and click on more, I can also hide that all together. So if I click hide video panel, the little video went away on the screen. And then one other thing I'll show you, I can also come in here and say hide the floating meeting controls as well. Okay, so now my screen's completely distraction free. And if you're going to be doing a decent amount of presenting, I'd actually recommend this. So this presentation here is from an event we had a few months ago. All you really start doing is you just start presenting, right? So you just start clicking, moving your slides ahead. And this part you do essentially exactly the same way you would do with an in-person meeting. The one thing I do want to mention here is you have to talk to the camera almost like you're talking to the real people in real life, right? You have to really envision that you're standing there in front of the room. And in fact, you almost have to take it a step further and almost kind of overact, right? You might actually try to be more expressive and use your hands more and really kind of lean in and out and be as exciting as possible, more so than you would do in person, because a lot of that stuff doesn't translate particularly well into the camera. So if you ever talk to like a real actor, I mean, you know, you'll find obviously they have to really give it their all. They have to lean into it as much as possible. They have to work on their, you know, tone of voice and inflection and all that kind of stuff. That's all going to play a part here. So you want to make sure you're doing as much of that as possible. Okay, so once you're done with your presentation, that's all pretty easy. You may want to come back, and so you hit escape to turn those controls back on. And actually that also downsized my presentation. And then I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to show my video panel again. And I'm going to click on this, so now I can see everyone again, right? So remember, I'm still sharing my screen. So if I ended my presentation, I want to go ahead up here and click on Stop Share. And that gets rid of the presentation. So now they're not seeing the presentation anymore. What they're seeing is what they see on the screen, okay? So that's almost everything. I do want to show you one more thing that you can control here. So as you remember, you are currently recording. And what you're recording is going to be essentially whatever version you're seeing. So I want to click on this and I want to show you a couple options. So I can actually click on this and change it to speaker view. And so what this is going to do is it's going to show me whoever is making the most noise essentially, right? So I'm the host, so it's not going to show me myself, but between the two guests here, if I were to turn off the mute, if I were to allow them to speak, it would focus on whoever's talking, right? So speaker view can be particularly useful based on that. And then you want to click on gallery view if you want to be able to see everyone at the same time. The reason I want to mention that is that if you're recording, it's going to show whichever of these views you have it set to. So if you want to make sure everybody on the meeting is being shown, make sure you switch to gallery view. If you want just the person who's speaking to be recorded, you can switch to speaker view. All right, so I believe that is everything. So now to wrap up, I'm going to show you how to end the meeting. So once everything is done, great, everybody's had a good time. That was a great meeting. Everybody appreciates it. Good stuff. We're going to come down here and click on End Meeting. And obviously we can leave the meeting and let it run, or we can go ahead and click on End Meeting for all. We're going to do that. And at that point, the meeting is finished. Everybody's logged out. I'm checking my phone over here. It says the meeting's been ended by the host. So everything worked correctly. And your meeting's done, right? So at this point, I want to show you one more thing because there is that recording now. So we're going to go back to Zoom. Go back to the Zoom homepage and go to My Account. And where you find that recording is over here. So we're going to click on Recordings. And that very first one, it's still processing, but this first one here is the meeting that I just did. And once it's done being processed, I'll actually be able to come over here. I can share it, and I can also download it or delete it. So that's how you access the recording of your training. And in that case, I would make sure you share it with anybody who wasn't able to be at that meeting, all right? So that's it. That's Zoom. That's how you run a Zoom meeting. And I really, really recommend Zoom for this kind of stuff. There are other tools. We will do some trainings on how to use those as well. But we wanted to make sure that you had a basic understanding of all of the features, all of the tools you have available through Zoom so that you can run a very, very productive meeting through these systems. And you'll probably find that there will be times in the future where you're going to want to default to Zoom anyway. It's a very convenient communication tool. It allows you to communicate with a lot of people very, very efficiently. And it actually might make it easier to get more people to your meetings than ever before. So maybe in the future, if you get back to doing in-person meetings, think about setting up a webcam and also having a Zoom call running. And then anybody who's out of town or who isn't able to get to the office can also participate. So this is the first of several more free trainings we're going to be offering. Right now, with everything that's going on, we want to make sure that it's as easy as possible for people to transition to working from home. This tool is probably the most useful when it comes to working from home, so we want to share it with you first. We do have more trainings coming your way, so keep an eye out for them, and we are going to be sharing all kinds of awesome stuff in the weeks to come. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next training.